Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Orphanlast experience. This is Skylar Madison as I kind of show you guys a little bit of the behind-the-scenes features of me creating this background. And here you can kind of see, you know, the before, kind of work in progress, as well as the final image here. And I'll show you the final image at the end of the video as well, just to kind of show how things have turned out. I wound up trying a lot of different experiments and such like that. I don't really have that much experience coloring images, especially with grayscale paintings and such like that. And so I was just trying something new, and I was also doing it out of order. Normally with a grayscale image, the workflow goes kind of like this. What you do is you create all of your grayscale sort of values, and so basically you shade the image, whether it's with a variety of different sorts of cross-hatching, or whether or not you use a variety of different types of textured brushes. You apply a lot of darks and lighter colors and stuff like that, and then what you do is you apply a bunch of different layers with a variety of different types of blending modes to apply lighting effects and a bunch of different sorts of colors, some that just apply kind of a matte sheen to the image, and then other layers that with blending modes that apply like desaturation, and other ones that apply saturation and things like that. And I found that the workflow was pretty difficult for me to work with, to be honest. I wound up doing things so out of order. I wound up basically applying a bunch of textures without any grayscale values or anything like that. So the majority of this video actually kind of looks like I'm doing a hell of a lot of nothing. But I am doing something. I am applying textures. And then once those textures are applied, I started using gradients in order to kind of shade everything quite a bit. And, you know, if I were to do this again, you know, I'd do it differently. I'd probably use the more traditional style sort of methods and such like that in order to apply the grayscale first, and etc, 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 you know. But, you know, now I know how to do it better. I know how to do it better at this point, and so I don't have to stress too much about it from this point forward. Next time I do this, things will flow a heck of a lot better. I understand what I'm actually working with. But one thing that I struggle with is that with Photoshop, I understand very easily how to save a selection, especially with layer masks. All I need to do is make a selection, set it to a layer mask, and then just press Control and click on the thumbnail on that layer mask, and ta-da, I have that selection all over again. So it's really easy to save selections on Photoshop, but for some reason in Krita, it doesn't work that way. There are kind of sort of something that's kind of like a layer mask inside of Krita, but it doesn't seem like I'm able to just press Control and click on the thumbnail. So throughout the process of me actually working with this image, it just seemed like I was making selections over and over and over and over again, and I found a few shortcuts that worked, sort of, but I wound up finding that a lot of the textures, because I kept selecting things over and over again and didn't really have a really super effective way of saving a selection and reselecting it over and over again, that I wound up rushing a lot of my selections, and so the textures wound up kind of being outside of the lines. And this is really irritating because, like, what I wound up doing to kind of compensate for that is I actually started to thicken the lines, which, you know, if you can't color inside of the lines, just thicken the lines. It's kind of a cheat, but in the end, it didn't hurt the image, and so I'm just grateful for that. I mean, things worked out regardless, and so I'm happy about that. One thing that I am concerned about with this image is that Krita seems to work moderately well at 600 pixels per inch, and I'm kind of concerned about that because, like, trying to ramp up the pixels per inch inside of Krita just seems like everything starts lagging out way too much, especially while applying gradients, textures, and fills. And that I did a lot of that in this process. Sometimes it took 3 to 4 minutes just for one fill to show up, and sometimes it would just be an experiment, me experimenting with variously different things, and then I try to do a filter, 2 or 3 minutes, and waiting and waiting and waiting. There was a lot of work with this video, and so with 600 pixels per inch, am I going to break the image if I wind up zooming in on things inside of Open Tunes? I'm really concerned about that, and so I don't know what to do if that winds up being the case. You know, I still kind of feel like I have a lot to learn, especially in the coloring process of an image, primarily because children seem to always get the crappiest coloring tools. A child wants to color their image, and so they get the worst Crayola sort of crayons, they get the worst coloring pencils, they get the worst markers humanly possible. And, you know, when you ruin one masterpiece after another, there comes a point where you just kind of look at the process of coloring stuff and you just think, you know, I don't have to do this. You know, I don't have to ruin my image again. Or yet another image ever again. I just need to accept that this is, you know, I can color things digitally one day, and I'll focus on that when the time comes. And, you know, that's basically where I am right now. I feel like, you know, I have the tools at my disposal at this point in time. I can actually start learning how to color my images at this point. So this is not a tutorial by any stretch of the imagination. I'm more so talking to you guys about what I did to get the image to turn out the way it currently turned out, and also kind of asking for input. Like, what would you guys suggest in order to make a grayscale image if you happen to have a lot of experience in making grayscale images? So I don't know. It's just, you know, I'm kind of, this has really gotten me to think quite a bit, and I don't really know whether or not all of my techniques worked out. So if somebody could actually provide a polite sort of critique, I'm not asking for some guy to come to my picture and act like a douchebag or something. I'm asking if you could look over this image and, you know, pause the frame when I show you the final image and everything, either at near the beginning of the video or at the end of the video and everything. If you could actually look at it and just kind of think about what is wrong with the image and what I could do to do better at with just looking at the final image itself as something to critique, then that would be great. I mean, I am looking for something like ways to improve my ability in coloring, but also if you could look at the workflow as well. I mean, am I saying something that seems to not jive well with your understanding of how to work with a grayscale image? That's something that I would totally be open to hearing. Like, what is your workflow in doing this? And you know, even if you guys have like some sort of tutorials to suggest, either, you know, if you happen to have a tutorial that, you know, talks about how to save selections inside of Krita, I'm all ears. If you have tutorials that talk about like more so in depth on how to color, whether with Photoshop or Krita, I don't care. But if it actually is talking directly about Krita, all the more power to you, because like I'm more interested in learning how to work with Krita in the coloring process, because that's exactly the program that I'm using. The one thing that turned out looking the best was the floor, which was the weirdest process of me working with. I picked this texture that looked nothing like a tile floor. I inverted it, and it had all these like really sharp lines to it. Here you see me kind of experimenting with the variously different textures and using a variety of different types of filters and such like that with the floor to try to get it to work. And even still, after one attempt after another, I just kept on trying different types of textures, and this one I just wound up inverting it, and then I noticed that it just seemed like it was just this flat sheen. So I went ahead and transformed it and kind of stretched it up, and then stretched the bottom nodes horizontally outward, so that you know, it had this effect as though perspective had this surface, this plane that's going towards you, the way that the floor would actually appear in reality if the floor was in that position. And so since the lines were so crisp, so sharp, I went ahead and used a filter and went ahead and just kind of blurred it a little bit, and that made it look really nice. But I didn't really have any real, true, genuine idea as to how it was going to look in the end until I actually started to apply color and possibly even lighting. And after the lighting effect, I gotta say, it just looks real nice. It looks like the sort of tile floor that you would see inside of a hospital, in my opinion. As you can see right now, I'm applying a bunch of gradients. This is kind of adding a little bit of depth to everything, but you know, what I'm finding is that when I started creating different layers with different blending modes and such like that, the more and more you'd get your colors towards these darker areas, it would darken the color quite a bit. And you know, I'm not opposed to that. I actually like that quite a bit. But you know, how you know, it just makes me think, you know, I got 3 big light bulbs inside of this hallway here. Where would the darkness appear? You know, and how would you? I'm not even quite sure if I necessarily applied the gradients or the shading properly. I think I was more so thinking sculpturally rather than in terms of lighting. But, you know, now after the fact, I'm kind of thinking, well, maybe I should have been thinking in terms of lighting and how, like, I applied this gradient right smack dab in the middle of the wall there that you're looking at next to the two doors, and I'm just thinking, well, you know, was that the right thing to do? Like, applying that gradient? I don't know how to really consider that. How do I even apply, you know, the feeling of depth and everything, and the whole concept of grayscale if I can't seem to apply any shading anywhere because there's 3 lights everywhere? How do I do that? And so, and the thing is that inside of a hospital, they tend to have this lighting that's not like pinpointed or anything. It's very ambient. It just kind of radiates and reflects off of everything. And so, very reminiscent of what you would expect heaven to look like, I guess, except for people don't die in heaven, I guess. Now, for me, I kind of consider this image to be a little bit of a success story because really, I started to just kind of color this image, and it's, again, this is one of my weaknesses. I did something that I didn't think that I would be able to do, and it wound up with, it came out with basically moderately decent results, and I feel like things turned out pretty well. But I am thinking about grabbing that gradient that happens to be smack dab in the middle of the picture, right where those two doors are sitting right next to each other, and just kind of cutting them and pasting them. That puts them onto a separate layer in Krita, and then lowering the opacity of it, and then merging it with the rest of the grayscale stuff. Thinking over this image in total, I'm looking over the windows and everything. I'm thinking, yeah, you know, the windows didn't really turn out looking that well, but they look good enough. By the time that I actually start coloring and not just applying gradients and such like that, I'm looking at this image and I think, yeah, you know, this looks like my background. This looks like my video intro. And as long as I'm feeling like that, you know, I felt like, well, some of the questions that you have to pose to yourself while you're working on an image is just, you know, when do I finish? When is this finished? How do I truly know? And really, I just kind of kept looking it over, and since I don't have much experience in coloring, I was just thinking, yeah, you know, I could probably do like 5 or 10 other steps at this point, but it's starting to look good at this point. It just looks good at this point, especially the floor. And I was thinking, yeah, you know what? Let's call it good. Let's call it a wrap. What I'm thinking about with the animation, I'm thinking about using the effects schematic and actually just kind of, once I start animating the camera to follow the variously different animations throughout the scene, I'm thinking about adding lens flares to the lighting and possibly just making things look a little bit more dynamic, possibly even applying a reflective surface on the floor if I can. Now, none of these are promises. These are just ideas that I have with where to go from here. How is this all going to come together? I'm thinking about all of the things that could possibly be in this versus what may very well be in it in the end. So, you know, just as a little bit of a side note, I just purchased a new microphone for you guys. Well, it's not for you guys, it's for me, but really it's just to ramp up the audio quality. I got a bunch of complaints about it, just simply because I guess there was some sort of hum going on in the background, and let me know if you hear an improvement to the audio quality. I have a question for you guys. Do you feel as though I have a strange way of articulating myself? Because, you know, I know that I have somewhat of a... I have a really big vernacular. I basically have a decent-sized vocabulary, I guess. I don't know if that makes me difficult to understand or what it is. Someone also said that I tend to repeat myself, and yeah, you know, from video to video, I tend to repeat myself quite a bit because I can't expect someone to see every single one of my videos or to discover me on my 200th video and then expect them to watch all 200 of my videos just because I'm repeating myself. I can't do that. No, I need to be able to be accessible to just about anybody who winds up watching my videos. So, you know, what does that mean exactly? What does that complaint mean, or at least critique? What does that... I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's the fact that I repeat a word over and over again, like how I just barely said, I don't know. Is that annoying? I don't know. I really don't. But I don't know. Just give me some feedback. It would be really nice. Just leave some comments, either about the critiques about my techniques that I used here. Once again, as I said earlier, I did things out of order for a grayscale image. I applied the textures first instead of applying the grayscale first. But really, in the end, I kind of feel like on a scale from 1 to 10, I would give myself an 8 on this, and 8 being the best, 10 being the best, and 1 being the worst. I would give myself about an 8 on this image. I still kind of feel like the windows didn't ever really turn out the way I wanted to, but in the end, when I would zoom out from the image and look at everything as a whole, I would see the background to my video intros. Anyways, I'll go ahead and keep on talking as soon as I can think of something to say. Now, throughout the time that I was making this image, I started to use this brush called the Shape Fill brush. It's kind of weird because you draw this outline and it fills everything within the outline. And I kind of talked about this brush within my first speed painting. And, in the end, I feel like this kind of slowed me down. But really, after you make a million selections over and over again, because you can't seem to find some way to save a selection, you just wind up finding any desperate way to change things up, because if you need to make another selection, you might just blow your brains out, it feels like. It just, I don't know. Some forms of repetition I just get tired of, especially once I wind up seeing where the textures aren't matching up with the lines and everything. So, it's little frustrations like that made me want to kind of change things up. And so here I am kind of coloring the wall. Things are looking moderately decent. I just barely used a color that is ever so slightly different than the background color. And I don't really know why I decided to make the background color this kind of teal sort of color. I don't know what inspired me to do that. I think it was just more like, okay, well, how about this be the base color of everything? Something that's more along the lines of, this is the theme of the background. Hospitals tend to have this kind of white kind of feeling. And, with a lot of indoors sort of lighting as well. And so, indoor lighting tends to oftentimes either have like this very yellow sort of hue to it, or it either has that or a very blue-like color. Now, here you see me actually coloring the floor with that same kind of shape fill sort of tool. And pretty soon here you'll see me kind of put the light fixtures reflection into the flooring, and it's at that point where this picture just starts to really stand out, in my opinion. It just seems like whoa, I didn't think the floor would turn out looking that good, and it really did, in my opinion. It just, whoa, look at that.
creative imagination began with a new art form. Makes me feel I belong to something.
Here I just went ahead and colored the floor, and just watch as I actually apply the reflection of the lights above the floor, and that is when the floor just looks stinking awesome, in my opinion. It just, I am surprisingly satisfied with how it turned out. Anyways, that pretty much concludes it for this video. If you guys liked it, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you didn't, please like, share, and subscribe anyways.